Okay, draw with me, guys. Let's do a new one. I'm actually really enjoying these Roman legions. It's a subject I'm pretty familiar with, so I think I'm going to draw another one for this video. So I drew this guy in the last video, and I did these guys off screen. I didn't think they would actually turn out that good, but I kind of like them, especially this dude here. He actually turned out pretty well, because I didn't really have a plan of what he would look like. I just kind of went in blind, and yeah, I kind of like how he turned out. So I might work with this pose. And I did like a little eye sketch as well, because man, eyes are always, it's hard to draw eyes when you're designing characters. So I made that little sketch just to kind of help me out with the lighting a little bit. He looks cool. He looks cool. He looks a little bit funny. As always, you know, I try to draw without reference as much as I can, just for these sketches. And, you know, I think this particular angle, I really struggled with him. I really just couldn't quite get it right. So I might have to tackle him another time. But this guy looks cool. I really like the lighting scenario that I've got going on here. I like his pose. He's meant to be holding onto his javelin here. The Pila or the Pilum. I can't actually remember the name of the equipment, but that's kind of what's meant to be going on there, in case you're wondering why his hand is sticking out like that. I reckon, let's draw him again. So this is how I like to work. I like to kind of get a quick sketch on the page. His face took me a while, to be honest, but I like to get a quick sketch on the page and kind of refine it a little more. So I'm going to put him just over here so I can use him as reference. Maybe I'll just put him there. I'm just going to put him underneath my coffee mug. This time I'm also I've got Pinterest open. It's an awesome app if you're looking for ideas. I use it all the time. And I've got some anatomy references. These are some diagrams drawn by Bames, Gottfried Bames. So when I'm drawing figures, I don't like to use photo references, if that makes sense. I like to use drawings, like constructive drawings, because the artist is kind of doing the work for you. You can kind of see the planes a lot more clearly. So if I do use references, I like to use drawings. Now, not all of these drawings are done by Bames. This one's actually Vladimir something or other. Forgot his name. Mogilevtsev. But most of these are drawn by Gottfried Bames, and he's just a brilliant artist when it comes to human anatomy. And I love using him as a reference if I need one, because I can just look at his drawings and I can go, oh, okay, that's what the arm kind of looks like. And I can see how he's simplified it. I don't know if you can see this on screen. But yeah, he's a good one to work from. I'll show you what else I've got. I got a board for like every subject. I got one just for hands, which is useful. Some very simple diagrams. Roman armor. This one's going to be useful. I might use this one today because, you know, the sketches that I did beforehand, I think they look good, but they're very, they're not very detailed. And I need a reference to kind of fill in the gaps of information. We've got some really cool images going on here. So I don't really know. I think that one's cool. Yeah, I don't know. I'm going to keep this to the side and I'm just going to scroll through. But the first things first, we got to put him on our page. So it looks like I've got a scribble on that. That's really distracting. So enough talk, let's sketch. And let's see if I can maybe draw him a little bit better this time. So let's see, I'm gonna just kind of sketch the, just the head shape. I'm gonna try and draw him a little bit larger. And I'm just gonna use pretty basic lines, because I don't want to overcomplicate things this early in the drawing. I just got to make sure that I'm just using very straight or just simple lines, not drawing over them too much. So I'm just drawing the pit of the neck right now. That's like the cylinder of the neck that I'm scribbling in there. So that's where his neck would insert into his shoulders. Maybe his shoulder ends about there on that side. So, you know, everything is just a kind of estimation on my part. His chest, which I might just kind of simplify as a sort of box form. And you'll notice that when I'm sketching like this, I'm not drawing very cleanly. My lines are a little bit scribbly, but I do try to make an effort not to go over them too much. So this is kind of where his chest would meet his stomach. I just need to find out. Yeah, okay. So if I take the height of his head, duplicate that from his chin, then his nipples are going to be somewhere there. So I'm going to measure a little bit just to make sure I'm getting the general proportions in there. So that means that then the underside of his pecs would be kind of there, and then that would turn into his torso. This would be the center line. His arm would sort of be tucked away behind his chest a little bit, maybe. And his elbow, I'm trying to remember the proportion of that, but look, I'll just put it there. So I'm going to just draw his arm, just sketching it in. I'm having a look at the sketch on the side, and his upper arm is kind of coming out at an angle, which I actually prefer that. Whereas here it looks like he's tucking his elbow behind. Yeah, I think I might stick with the sketch. I'll just stick to the plan. So I'll put his upper arm there, and his forearm can sort of stretch out this way. I'm just going to keep my lines very light. So this is his forearm. And then his wrist. Oh, that would... Well, I'm just going to map in a very basic hand, if you can even call it that at this point. Hands are very tricky. Sometimes I can draw them from imagination, but other times I can't. I guess it depends on the angle. This is actually my first drawing of today, so I'm kind of not having very high hopes that this is going to turn out well. I mean, I hope it does. That'd be nice. All right, so then his arm is going to sort of come down here on this side. And I'm not really going to draw the rest of that. I'm going to let the drawing fade out at around this area. But I think, let me just get a feel for this. If his pec tucks under the armpit like that, and then the bottom of his arm would sort of be in that position, right? And that's the thing, I think when you're drawing figures, just try to draw it as, I mean, not too quickly, but not too slow. I think Proco on his YouTube channel, I think he said, draw as fast as you can think. And I think that's brilliant advice because it makes so much sense. So if his arm is coming out here, this is his arm, and then his sleeve, because they've got like this sort of shirt underneath all the armor, his sleeve would kind of come out of there and then get tucked under the armpit there, and maybe the sleeve sort of flares out at the back. I'm just putting in very basic guidelines, but I'm trying to describe what I'm doing and what I'm thinking so that the drawing makes a bit more sense. I think his head looks a bit big with the proportions, just for the proportions that we're working with. So I may as well edit that. Let's just take that down. I don't like using the eraser too much in this stage because I used to have such an over-reliance on erasing things all the time. I don't know if anybody else had that weakness, but man, I used to erase everything all the time and it would just take me forever to do a drawing. All right, so the side of his face, because he's kind of looking in this direction, side of his face would kind of be there, and maybe this way you see a little bit poking outside here. Yeah, that looks a bit better. So then his ear would sort of still be sort of on the side here. And then, because his head's on a tilt. Okay, so have a look at this. This is, I know my heads are really scribbly when I'm sketching like this, but there is one construction that I think you should pay attention to. Have a look at this center line that I've drawn down the middle of his face. So if you want to draw mirrored things, so if I want to draw the ear on the other side, then what I can do is I can sort of draw a line perpendicular to this construction line here. Maybe that should be a little bit angled. There we go. And then that little construction line will sort of help guide me as to where his other ear should be going. Now, I don't always do that because sometimes I just like to really free myself up and not have too many construction lines on the page. But if you want to keep your designs a bit more symmetrical, then take a look at the center line of the face, and then anything that's got to be mirrored, you can just make a line perpendicular to that line. So hopefully that helps. It's not 100% technically accurate if you're thinking in terms of perspective, but sometimes you just got to design things in a simple way in order to get very effective results. That's what I think anyway. So I'm just gonna rub my hand all over this just to lighten up the line work, because we've got to draw on it too. We've got to draw his eyebrows. Now this is his chin. We can see the underside of his jaw, so he's lifting his head up. So if you're thinking about the classical proportions of the face, then we have to kind of lift everything up a little bit. And I'm not gonna measure, I'm just gonna go for it. I'm actually just gonna put things in a position that I think look good, because that's what I did with his sketch on this side. So maybe base of his nose could come here. Oops, I didn't mean to erase all of that. And his hairline would, from this angle, maybe be very close to the top of the head there, maybe. I don't really think we need to draw his hairline because he's wearing a helmet and everything, so it seems a little bit pointless, but anyway. Bottom lip, roughly about there, but I might just deviate from the classical proportions a bit. Now they've got this kind of, see, this is where I might need a reference actually. Legionnaire. That's a cool one. What else we got? It's kind of got like this scarf thing. Which I'll just sketch in very lightly. The helmet, let's have a look. So I'm kind of using the face proportions. I should probably put his eye line in there as well. Something like that. So I'm going to use the proportions of the face to kind of design the helmet. And they've kind of got this cover that goes around the chin, kind of protects the chin there. And then it sort of opens up around the mouth area. I'm just going to sketch this in very carefully. And okay, so then the top of the helmet, I'm just going to jump around the drawing a little bit, just finding bits and pieces. It's a good idea to not get tunnel visioned into any particular part of the drawing. You just got to I'm trying not to let the hang on, I'm just trying to focus. I'm trying not to let my initial sketch to dictate what I'm doing too much, because the thing is, every line that I make on this page is subject to change. All right, so that's just something that you got to remember. Okay, let me just figure out the width of the nose here. That's the base of the nose. Then the width I might just have somewhere there. Probably should have drawn this in first. Now his head is at an angle, which means the tip of his nose would sort of be maybe there. This is all an estimation. Okay, something like that. Right. Okay. I'm still not happy with the shape of that panel on the side of the face. So I might struggle with this part. It's a very strange shape. So, you know, the Roman helmets, let's have a look. They got these panels on the side of the helmet, right? That protect the sides of the face. And I'm trying to just work out the angle of these because they are affected by perspective as well. So I'm just trying to figure out what that might look like in this perspective. So yeah, when I'm using references, if I've got to use them, sometimes I'll use them if I need to refine any details of a design. But you know, again, I'm not copying what's in the reference. I'm not trying to copy the image. It's not really what I want to do, because I still want to create my own characters and, you know, draw my own ideas. This part's taking me a lot longer to draw than I thought it would, but whatever. It's the first drawing of the day, so I'm not going to beat myself up about it. I don't beat myself up for drawing too slow anymore, to be honest. Like sometimes, you know, that's just the way it is sometimes, you know. Sometimes I just have very, very slow days where my brain isn't really working as good as I want it to. I mean, the fact that I've got time to actually sit down and draw is really a blessing in itself, so I should just appreciate that. I used to be such a perfectionist in my drawing. But I feel like as you get a bit older, you kind of just loosen up a little more and you just care less. Okay, so that's not bad. I can kind of work with that shape. Still got to draw the other side though, and that's a bit tough. This one's a little bit tougher because everything is kind of turning away now in perspective. So this panel is going to look a bit different from this one. And that's just something I've got to be aware of. And everything becomes more and more foreshortened. So what I'm doing here, remember that center line of the face that was going in that angle? And I'm just having a look at this panel, like this side panel of the helmet and where it attaches into the top part here. And I'm just taking that point and I'm transferring it, again, keeping that line perpendicular to that center line of the face. And then where it hits that curvature, more or less, you know, it's an estimation, but more or less that's where that panel should begin. So that's kind of what I'm thinking of there. And then the perspective of this curve is going to be a little more extreme as a result of that. That looks about right. I don't know if that's completely accurate, but man, I'm using my eraser a lot today. I was a lot more confident yesterday in my drawing. All right. So we've got these things that sort of travel around the ear a little bit. And if the position of his ear is more or less there, then that gives me a clue as to where I should be drawing this part. Yeah, my lines are not very confident today. Oh well. I'm kind of just estimating where the back of that helmet is going to be. So I'm just drawing like this sort of elliptical shape. I'm not even sure if that's traveling in the right direction. Yeah, I don't know why it's getting higher on that side. It really should. There we go. Maybe I'll just refine the position of this side a little bit. Okay. I think that coffee is the only thing that's keeping me going today. I think I have way too much of a reliance on coffee, honestly. I never used to drink it. All right, so let's have a look at the center line of his face, which means the center line of the helmet would be there. And then they've got this sort of visor thing that protrudes. So I might just bring that center profile line out there. And I'll just kind of sketch a curve that I think looks good, I guess. Not bad. Got this bit though, that should sort of curve out that way. I think I need a sharper pencil because my lines are getting a bit fuzzy. Okay. It's always a good day when you can do a sketch without erasing anything in it. Wish I was having one of those days right now. All right, let's kind of sketch in the position of the breastplate. So I've got this profile line of his torso traveling this way. So the breastplate is going to go there, more or less. Let's... And you got these forms kind of wrapping around his torso. And it should start curving downwards as the perspective changes. Because I think we can assume that the horizon line is somewhere lower than his head anyway. So it's safe to assume that. All right, so then they got like these sort of shoulder plates. I love drawing these. They just look awesome. So like there's one there, and then there's like another one that tucks it under that. I think usually it kind of comes out at a bit of an angle for some reason. There was one reference I had, I have to look for it, but it was like a technical diagram of Roman armor, like this armor in particular, because there's a lot of different types of Roman armor. That was an empire that lasted for centuries, but for this armor in particular, I did find a reference which it was a diagram of how all the pieces fit together, and I think that's what helped me draw it a bit better, even though my drawings are very sketchy. It just helped me understand what I was doing a little bit better. Okay, and then we've got one, and then there's like these smaller ones which are just sort of protect the upper arm. It's kind of hard drawing armor. I don't know if I like that shape. I think I want to curve that a little more. Yeah, it's I love freehand sketching figures like this. It's a nice change from the architectural stuff that I draw usually, because everything in architecture is very technical and not as fun as this. Sometimes it's a lot of fun though. Like I do like drawing architecture, and I love drawing in perspective, obviously, but yeah, drawing just freehand and loosening up is it's just nice. And it's a kind of skill in itself that you have to train, because even though you might be good at perspective drawing, doesn't mean that you're good at freehand drawing and sketching. I feel like you have to train both of them. So, okay, so then he's got his sleeve kind of poking out somewhere here. Yeah, that looks a bit flat on that side. I think I might... That's a tricky angle. Right, so we've got this sort of collar. There's like this leather strap that ties this chest plate together. I remember that. There was a video on, it might have been Proco's YouTube channel. And he had like a guest artist, and unfortunately I can't remember who it was now. But he was talking about this technique called the reference sandwich. I think if you type in reference sandwich, you might find the video. But he was talking about how, you know, if he was designing characters and stuff like that from imagination, he would use a reference first to kind of get an idea of what it was he was drawing, and then he would go into it just drawing from imagination, and then he would use a reference again, which is a pretty interesting way of working and probably makes the most sense. I think that's kind of what I do. Like I kind of just sketch from my head first so that I'm not being influenced too much by references. And then once I've got the idea, then I'll use references to kind of fill in the gaps of information if I need it. But I try not to draw from reference too much. I mean, you got to draw from reference to learn how to draw, obviously, but if I want to draw something from my head, I'll just try and go as long as possible without using references. Just so I can keep the image as interesting as I possibly can, I guess. All right, so I'm going to go through Pinterest and just have a look at what I've got. Just want to see if there's any other. That's cool. I think that was the diagram I was talking about. I just want something for these shoulder pads. Okay, that's there's a few different ideas. You know, I'll just sketch what I know. So there's a little bit of a gap in this top one. I guess that's how to join it together. I'll transfer that onto the other side there. There's obviously there's something joining together, like a sort of metal buckle, which it's like this very weird abstract shape. It's like some sort of circular decoration. Maybe I could put one down here too. There is that leather strap that goes over his torso. That would be where his gladius goes, it would be holding up the holster of his gladius, which would maybe be somewhere here, which will just indicate with a few sketchy lines. And then they've got this belt, which starts at around, I think it goes above the hips. And I might get a reference for that, actually. Oh, that one's that's a pretty cool one. Oh yeah, that's very helpful. Should have just looked at that. I'm just trying to keep a lot of these references off camera because I don't know if there's like a copyright thing on YouTube. But if you go on Pinterest and just type in Roman armor, you'll see a heap of you'll see a heap of references, you know. But yeah, if you want to see my references, I'm sorry, I'm just being a bit cautious because I know there's like rules on YouTube about copyright and shit like that. So, not that I'm actually copying the photo, but I don't know. It's a weird one. Yeah, I remember they've got like these sort of leather straps that hang from the belt. Does anybody in the comment section know what that is? Because I'm not much of a historian when it comes to, you know, military uniforms and things. Like, I know how to draw them. But yeah, I've noticed like in Roman armor and like these legionnaire uniforms, there's like these leather straps that hang down the front, and they've got these sort of like circular medallions or something. It's an interesting feature of the armor. I think it looks awesome. But I don't really know what they are. But, you know, if anybody in the comment section knows, I'm sure we would love to learn about what it is. I'd like to know what it is, what I'm drawing. I could research it myself, I suppose, but I'm a bit busy researching classical architecture at the moment. Looks like there's like a strap or something that goes over the... Oh, okay. That's a tricky one to draw. I'm just going to scribble it in, but there's like this leather strap for the belt, I suppose, sort of hanging off down there. And then it wraps around this ring. Probably refine that later, but anyway. Drapery. Very difficult. I'm going to keep it simple. I'm just going to come up with a nice design like this. And then maybe I'll refine that later. I think I want his arm to be sort of coming out there. So elbow would sort of be around this region here. So his forearm would sort of start there. He's got a sleeve on this side. And then there'd be a bunch of like drapery folds from where the sleeve sort of folds in. Okay, I think we've got enough information to work with. I've spent quite a long time actually on that line drawing. So now I've got to start shading it all in. So I'm not gonna draw the planes of the face too much with the line work. I'm kind of gonna try and just shade it in, keep it soft. So I'm just shading in the eyebrow. This is the nose here. And I'm just gonna do it very gently. Just forgot to draw in these laces for the helmet here, because these panels are like, they're sort of like tied together. So whenever you're drawing armor, it's good to have a look. If you can, try to find some references where you get a really close, in-depth look at it, and see if you can understand how it works and how it all fits together. Because if you can do that, then your armor designs will be a lot more believable. I'm just going to shade this entire side of his face. I really like that sort of lighting scenario where he's got like these shadows cutting across his face, so it looks like the sun is really low. Maybe it's like a sunset or sunrise. But I'm really liking that lighting scenario, so I'm going to stick with it. So I'm just going to think about where the shadows might be falling. So I'm just trying to shade in all the planes that I think would be in darkness, given the lighting scenario that I'm working with. I feel like the top of these shoulder plates would be in light, and then it would sort of turn into shadow down here somewhere. It's kind of what I'm envisioning. I feel like this would be completely in shadow. But yeah, when I start rendering, I'm just going to keep my strokes very light. And that way I can just build them up over the course of time. So he's got like this sort of scarf around his neck, and so there'd be a few drapery folds in there, no doubt. I'm just sketching them in. Not really drawing it too accurately at this point. I just got to map everything in. It's kind of what I got to do. I just got to think very carefully about the light source. Okay. Maybe we'd get a bit of a half tone or something from this drapery fold right here. That would all be in shadow, definitely. This one. That's got to be shaded in. Bit of shadow falling over the arm, maybe. So I'm just going in with very basic hatching strokes. I'm not doing anything too crazy. Just filling in the blanks, just filling in the parts that I think should be in darkness. And I'm just taking my time with this stage. I don't want to do anything too nuts. So I feel like this side of his armor would be pretty much completely in shadow. That's sort of the rough position. But because the breastplate changes angle and it sort of faces up a little bit more, I'm not so sure where the shadow would fall on that. I feel like it would be in light a little bit more. It's just things like that which are really tough to design. But we got something. I think we've got a good start. But I gotta come back to the face now. It's the face that I've really got to spend a lot of time on. And I like to sort of, like I'll map the shadows in basically, and then I'll come back to the face. Just using very soft strokes to kind of carefully map the image out. But yeah, I like to spend a bit of time on the face because if I can make this look good, because I'm not always guaranteed a good result. Sometimes my drawings go very, very wrong. And it's just really soft strokes, to be honest. I'm kind of using my previous sketch as a guide. Like I'm using these sketches, taking what I learned from here. So I don't have to use too much brain power deciding where the shadows are going to go. I can kind of just jump in and start sketching, but I'm going to spend a lot of time here now just deciding on where I want things to sit. And even though the human face is very complicated and it has a lot of planes and, you know, abstract forms, I'm still trying to use very basic straight lines, as you can see. Like I'm really trying to simplify as much as I can. I really don't want to go too complicated this early in the drawing. And I'm just using very light strokes. I'm using the weight of the pencil. And I only draw like this when I'm gonna sink some time into this kind of drawing. if I wanted it to be a rough sketch, it probably would have been finished by now. But because I kind of like the idea of this figure so much, I'm gonna try and sink a bit of time into him. It's getting a bit fuzzy. But yeah, just really light strokes. Just so I can get the eraser in there and edit a few shapes if I have to. I'm gonna put these, I'm gonna put Pinterest away because I don't need it right now. I really wanna just focus on designing and doing my own thing. I'll come back to the references when I need to fill in more information for the details of the uniform. I think that's a good tactic. So when I'm shading in, I'm kind of just not doing it too quickly. I'm thinking very hard about the planes of the face, even though I'm not strictly drawing them. I still got to think about them. I also got to think about the expression on his face. And I got to be careful that I don't overdo it on all the detail, because I really want to keep the shadow shapes quite basic. I think this is like the hardest part of the sketch, where you're refining the idea. So you've kind of sketched in the general idea. Nothing's refined yet. But yeah, I think this is like the hard part. But I'm going to spend a lot of time with his face. Just editing the shadow shapes, as you can see. And I'm not changing the shapes too much, because I think what I've got is kind of working. I'm going to get the eraser in again. There we go. I'm just chipping into the shadow shapes just very carefully. Just taking little bits out, adding little bits on. Because I think what I've got right now is kind of working. We can definitely see some kind of face. It's still very vague. It's still not finished. but we've definitely got something going on here. Another thing I struggle with actually is to keeping the light shapes very clean. Sometimes I go a bit overboard on the shadows and I just end up ruining the light shapes. And you don't want to overcomplicate your image too much. Because if you're going to draw a character from your head, then like I said before, you've only got a very fuzzy idea of what he looks like. You can't draw every single detail of a human face. I mean, you can't just draw every skin pore and every hair strand from imagination. That's just way too hard. Or maybe you can. Maybe you're a genius and you can do that. I can't do that. But another reason I think is that if you keep your drawing a bit more on the simple side and focus more on light and shadow, you get a much stronger or a much more effective image. Which is why I'm taking a long time on these shadows. I might switch pencils and use a sharper one, just so I can clean up some of the edges. I'm not going... Yeah, I mean, look, you can really see how much time I put into shading. It's a little bit... It might look a bit tedious. But honestly, I really like it. I really enjoy this part of the drawing where I can just shade and just slowly bring the image to life, I guess. So, you know, when I'm designing this shadow, see how it like sort of curls under his lip where, you know, the crease of the lips right there? And then it kind of pokes out in a different angle as it wraps around the bottom lip. And I'm not making those shapes too complicated. It's just 1, 2, 3, 4 angles. You got to simplify those angles. You know, it's so easy to overcomplicate them. And I think it takes a while to get good at simplifying things. Because it's not easy to simplify a complicated image. I think hyperrealism is easy. And I know I'm going to get a lot of flack for that, but I used to be a hyperrealist where I would just copy from photographs, and that was it. Like I would never draw anything from my head. I would only copy from photographs. And it was tedious, and it was time consuming, and it wasn't at all fun. But honestly, I thought, man, that's so easy. All I got to do is copy an image and put it on paper. And I didn't have to think about things like anatomy and shape design and perspective. And it wasn't until I started learning those things properly when I realized just how hard drawing is. But if you can put in the time and effort to learn those things properly, then you'll start getting good results. And it's going to take you years. It took me I started learning perspective drawing 4 or 5 years ago. 4 years ago. So that's not a long time to get good at drawing, I don't think. I think that's pretty reasonable. But, you know, I had to do it a lot. I'm just going to sort of put like an indication of one of his pupils right there. And that looks pretty nice. I don't think I would touch this too much because I always go a bit overboard on the eyes and I end up killing the image. If I'm going to... man, I've got to proceed very carefully now because I like what I've got. But I could really mess it up at any minute. But do you kind of see how I designed this guy? Like I started with very basic shapes and then I kind of just refined those shapes in very small ways. I want to put a little bit of crow's feet on this corner of the eye there. I don't know if that's a bit overkill. Yeah, I don't know. It looks okay, but I think I'm gonna lighten that up. I'm not 100% sold on that. It makes sense that he's squinting a bit more since he's looking directly into the sunlight for some reason. I'm not sure why. He just decided he wanted to blind himself and get discharged from the Roman military. So I'm kind of drawing this shadow side of the bottom eyelid right here, which I could use that little diagram there for you. So if you can get good at drawing anatomy like this, like all the planes and the turns of light, then you'll get good at drawing like that. It's all about light and shadow. But in order to draw light and shadow, you kind of gotta understand the planes a bit, which again takes a long time to do that. So don't pressure yourself into being a drawing master just yet. You've got, like, I had to put in a lot of work to just even just draw this, you know, which is very sketchy and unrealized. But, you know, drawing's hard, man. And I'm still not quite getting that. I don't know. I don't know if I'm quite getting that shape that I want. Like, this has got to start turning into shadow at some point, right? So but yeah, if you're going to design shadows on characters, my advice is, I mean, obviously it's very difficult to do. Because there's a lot of lumps and bumps in human anatomy. But my advice is keep the shadows simple. So, you know, this top of the helmet that's casting a shadow on his forehead, I'm just keeping it as a very simple curve. And that's it. I'm not thinking too hard about how it wraps around the form of the eye socket. Like I said, simple is effective. So I don't think you have to spend too much time. You don't have to spend weeks just perfecting that one little part. Just put like an hour or two into it. Focus on rendering, focus on your core shadows and your ambient lights, just things like that. And focus on simplifying those shadow shapes too. And simplifying the tones. But more importantly, just focus on shadow shapes that are gonna look good. Just focus on making shadow shapes that look cool. I think you'll get better results rather than thinking what looks realistic. Just focus on shadow shapes that give you the most striking image. And I don't know if that advice is gonna help you, so do with that what you will. All right. Well, I think we got a good start with this guy. Took me a bit longer than I wanted. But, you know, I'm expecting to sink some hours into him. Because I like him. I think I like where he's going. He looks a little bit different from the original sketch. You know, he's got like a slightly different... His facial features are a little bit different, but that's kind of why I like drawing from my head, so I can explore the possibilities. This eye is a little bit... Yeah, I don't know. I'll do something about that. But I think we're on a good start with him, so I reckon I'll record him again in the next video and we'll sort of continue on from here. Yeah, I think we've got something. Coming back to this guy again, so I'm going to really try to refine him a bit more, because I'm liking it. And I feel like at this point, this is kind of where the drawing gets a little bit easier. It's just time consuming now, because I'm just rendering. But the rendering stage is not that tricky. As long as you understand ambient light, ambient occlusion, things like that, then it's pretty manageable. But yeah, I really like this phase of the drawing because it's just I just go into a bit of a meditative state. I feel like I don't have to worry so much about proportions anymore. Like the drawing's kind of done at this point. I just gotta worry about just rendering it and not going overboard on the rendering. Just keeping it very simple. Taking my time. Not rushing it. It's just gentle hatching strokes, that's all it is at this point, which is good. I like to really deepen the tones on this part of the reflection down here on the helmet. And the reason for that is to kind of simulate the reflection of the horizon. So, you know, on this part, for example, even though this whole side of the helmet is in shadow, the reflective surfaces will kind of be overriding that. And it's going to be reflecting the color of the sky and the horizon. And then down here, a bit lower, it would start reflecting the ground surface, things like that. So it's not hard to imagine that it would get a bit darker in that area down there. So when it comes to rendering, you can kind of have a bit of freedom to do what you like, just as long as it makes sense. It doesn't have to be 100% true to reality, but as long as what you're drawing makes sense and there's a logic to it, then you can break the rules of reality a little bit. But yeah, I could spend hours rendering just the face alone and the helmet as well. And I honestly don't have a problem with that because it's a lot of fun. I do get very involved in this part of the process though. Like I kind of struggling to talk to the camera now because I'm just so involved in this work. So I hope you don't mind if I go a little bit quiet. You can see how I'm just cleaning up the edges of those shadows. Just refining some of those shadow shapes. Might have to think about maybe introducing some of those halftones into the flesh pretty soon, just to kind of support the shadow shapes a little more. At the same time though, I'm also trying to be very careful that I don't disturb the drawing too much. See, I've got to refine some of these planes here, and I've also got to it's getting there. Let's I'm going to push the darkness in this area a little bit because I really like how it contrasts the light side here. So I want to really kind of push that effect. Okay, so let's then... just going to darken this little nook in here. And in there too. So just kind of like going around that trim, around some of these details of the helmet. I'll just kind of darken in those areas. Reflective surfaces are never easy to render, in my opinion. I always struggle with those. But yeah, I always try to kind of think about maybe where the light is sort of reflecting from it. And I really try to push the contrasts in reflective surfaces a lot more. So this plane here, what I'm thinking is it's going to be darker up here, just to kind of separate it from this tone here. And then as it curls upwards, this plane sort of faces the sky. So it's going to be pretty bright, I'd imagine. I'm sure you figured out by now that I render very slowly. And I don't like to smudge. Just like to hatch them in, because by hatching my tones in, Well, I think I get two things. I think I get more interesting line work. And I think I also have a lot more control over the tones that I'm creating. Whereas if I'm smudging everything, then I don't know, I just run the risk of making a mess of things. And that's not what I want. I want to keep the drawing pretty clean. But it's just gentle hatching strokes from start to finish. And I've always got my eraser in case I need to clean anything up. Yeah, they're a bit too dark. I think I want to lighten that up, lighten that up. Definitely lighten that. And that one. There we go. That might be better. Just keep those nice and light. Okay, let's go into the shadows here then. I kind of need to lighten up some of this line work. I feel like a lot of my lines were very needlessly dark, I would say. I think I just kind of wanted them to be a bit darker so you could see what I was doing in the video. But yeah, really you want to keep it a bit more on the lighter side if you can. So yeah, the shadows of these shoulder plates, what I like to do is I like to kind of give them a little bit of space here, which means there would be a shadow casted on the one underneath. And then I kind of make it so that the shadow sort of touches the edge of the top one. So it's like these two surfaces are touching here. And then what I then do is I kind of draw another shadow where it starts like not, where the surfaces don't touch each other anymore. I don't know if that made sense. That's a really hard concept to explain, but that's kind of what I like to do there. There should actually be like a bit of a gap here, because if there's a gap here between these plates, then their shadows would be casted like that onto this plate. So makes sense to alter that a little bit like that. It kind of sells the illusion a little bit more. Yeah, I like drawing these forms. They can be a bit tricky, but they are a lot of fun. I don't know what to do about the shoulder pads on this side. I feel like I just didn't draw them properly somehow. I don't know. Cross that bridge when we come to it. But yeah, because the sunlight is coming this way, then I feel like his front side is going to be mostly in shadow, maybe. It's kind of hard to predict these things, but in my sketch, I've kind of shaded in his shoulder plates at the front. And then I think there's like a bit of shadow on this side of his torso. So that's kind of how I'm thinking of that. That's the thing. I don't know if it's like 100% correct, but I'm just kind of drawing what I feel is right at this point. I think this side definitely would be in shadow. Let's just draw. There's like these little buckles, or I don't know what they're called, but they're like these things on each side of the plates running down the center of the torso. And that's kind of where they lace up the armor. So then there'd be like some laces, I think. I'd have to, again, I'll probably look at a reference for that part, just to make sure. Feel like those shadows would actually come a bit further around the torso. Again, it's really tricky. It's tricky. Because this is the part where, you know, it doesn't matter how many references I have, it's not going to help me. This is, you know, this lighting situation that I'm using, this is something that I'm going to have to really figure out and take my time with. And, you know, you can rush it in a sketch, no problem. You can do a quick sketch and get a general idea, which is why quick sketches are so important. But on a finished drawing, it's weird. It's like, in a finished drawing, you have to really take your time a lot more because the mistakes are a lot more visible, I think. In a sketch, you've kind of got a bit more free reign to do as you want, more or less. You know, you've got a bit more freedom to break the rules, but doing a finished drawing, you've really got to sell the illusion that you're trying to sell. But you can't be too obsessive about it either. It's a very tricky balance, I find. But if there's anything I am unsure about, then you can see what I'm doing right now. I'm just putting in like these general hatching strokes. And those hatching strokes aren't really, they're a vague idea of what I want to do. Like I'm drawing them to kind of get a feel for where the shadows might be falling. And that's all you can do sometimes, you know, you've just got to just sketch it and see what it looks like. There's just some things that you can't predict. And it's like I always say, when when you're doing shadow shapes or anything like that, you've got to design the shadows. You have to design the realism. It's no good just copying from a photo, otherwise you never get good at drawing from your head. You've really got to be brave and, well, if you genuinely can't draw from your head, then you should learn perspective. Because perspective drawing teaches you a lot of things about the three-dimensional world. But it's pretty easy to refine your shadows once you've hatched them in. Like all these tones, once you've kind of figured out where everything's falling, then you can kind of just shade over them very lightly and you get a really nice rendered finish. And it doesn't take long to really do that. It took me a long time to learn how to do that. But once you're there and you've kind of figured it out a little bit, then drawing becomes a lot more manageable and it becomes a lot more fun as well. But I don't want to over render it, if that makes sense. Still want my hatching strokes to be visible. I still want this to be a sketch, even though it's a bit more refined. I'm not going for like photorealism. I'm just after a very strong, effective image. That's really all I want. Thinking maybe the light is kind of hitting this part of that helmet right there in that corner. That would look pretty cool. Yeah, I don't know. Again, reflective materials, they are so hard. They have always given me trouble. And I've always had to just kind of rely on general rules, you know, like I was never able to render reflective materials to a photorealistic finish. I suppose if I put even more time into it, maybe, but I don't know. There's always that part of the drawing where you're just ready for it to be over. And again, I don't really see the point in making it photorealistic, because that's kind of a futile thing. You can't really compete with reality. You can design it and you can change some things about it. You can probably even improve on it in some ways, which is even better. But I don't really think you can compete with it. You've just kind of got to I don't know, do your best, I guess. So I think for the forearms, I think I would need a reference for this part. I would look at Gottfried Bemmes just to kind of see how he hatches in those anatomical forms. I always struggled with arms. I'm not gonna lie. They're just really hard. A lot of muscles, a lot of bones. What I am doing is I'm just kind of rendering them very basically with hatching strokes, because I might be able to find some of the forms in there by doing that. But this is kind of where I would probably bring out a reference at this point, but I'll come back to this. I don't want to get into the anatomy just yet. Okay, so let's so his arm would be casting a shadow on his torso, right? Like that makes sense. So maybe we can just hatch in a bit of a shadow here, and we'll just get a feel for what's going on. And then these shoulder plates, they would definitely be casting a shadow as well. So it looks like, it turns out maybe that we're just getting like a sliver of light on his torso here. Possibly. Like I say, it's all a guesstimation. But it's amazing how you can really fake it until you make it, right? And then these panels would be casting shadows down onto each other like that. That's a pretty cool image. I think I'm pretty glad with how it came out. I was expecting it to come out a lot worse. You know what? Every time I do a drawing, man, I used to be such a perfectionist about my work, like to the point where it would prevent me from drawing. And had a bit of a voice break there. And I now go into drawing with the expectation that it's just not gonna come out as I want it to. And, you know, I kind of go in with the expectation that it's just not gonna turn out very well. Because a lot of the time for me, it doesn't, you know. Sometimes I get good days like this. There are a lot of days where they're not so good, and it's frustrating. But it's all part of the process. That's just what it is. I mean, I think we all wish that drawing would be easy. But the truth is, it's not easy. It's very difficult, and it's always going to be. And you're just going to have to accept that if you're going to draw and be an artist. And that's fine. Everybody struggles with drawing. No one can do it easy. It's just not an easy thing. And anybody that thinks drawing is easy has never picked up a pencil. Ever. I'll tell you that right now. Because think about it. If you're going to draw this, you've got to learn human anatomy. You've got to learn human proportions. You've got to learn military uniforms. You've got to learn perspective. You've got to learn constructive anatomy, which is a whole other thing. There's a lot of subjects for you to learn. And yeah, it's tough. It is very tough. But, you know, you put in the hours, you dedicate a bit of time here and there, and one day, everything just clicks. I feel like I only got comfortable drawing figures from my head, maybe just last year, honestly. Maybe even this year. Like, it wasn't long ago. And I'll tell you right now, I've been drawing for a very long time. But character design and drawing figures is just, it's always been a challenge, which is good because you need a challenge in life. But yeah, man, there's times where I wish it wasn't that difficult. But no, a challenge is good. So, you know, if you're struggling with drawing, you're not the only one. And you just got to learn to embrace the challenge. You just got to accept the fact that it's going to be hard. It's going to take you a long time to learn because everybody's gone through that. It's part of the process, you know. I used to beat myself up because I couldn't draw to the level that I wanted. And then one day I just kind of decided it doesn't matter anymore. Like, as long as I'm drawing, then that's a victory, right? It's got to be. Picking up a pencil and sitting down to draw, that is reward enough. That's what I tell myself anyway. Because there are a lot worse things you could be doing. Oh boy. Well, the sun's going down here, and the lighting isn't very good. I rely on natural light a lot, just because I don't know. I don't really like using ring lights and things like that for my drawing. I just like using natural light. I feel like I can just see things better. So I think I'll probably leave it here today. Maybe I'll come back to this piece and finish it. Would probably be a good idea. Or I might just leave it like this. I don't know. What do you think? Should I finish this piece? Should I render all of this? Or should I leave it just as a sketch? Let me know what you think. I kind of like it as a sketch, to be honest. I always like sketches. They've just got a more in the moment quality to them. I can't stop drawing now. I'm in the zone. I mean, man, I could spend ages on this piece, just refining it. But I think that's probably about it today. I think that's all I got in me. My brain's a bit fried. If I come back to this piece, I'm just going to bust out all of the references on Pinterest. And I'm just going to fix all the things that I got wrong. Fill in all of the gaps of information. But I like what I've got. I do like what I've got. Definitely got something. I was just hoping I could get him drawn a little bit faster, but I think I'm just having one of those days where my brain hasn't fully woken up. I have no idea how to draw that side of those shoulder pads. I don't know, they just look wrong. I should probably draw his javelin as well at some point. Or the peeler, or the pilum. I don't know how you pronounce it. Yeah, I've got to get that. I'll do it later. I'll do that one later. I might have a look at Gottfried Dames as well and get these arms rendered. I'll have a look at his diagrams and just see where all the muscles are. Just give myself a bit of a refresher. But it's amazing how, you know, you look at this and your brain kind of fills in some of the gaps in information. Like, you can kind of tell what it is. It's an arm, and, you know, it's a Roman guy, even though it's very sketchy. I think it's just amazing how our brains can fill in gaps of information like that, just with a few hatching strokes. Human brain, man, it is a scary thing. I'm just gonna hatch in his strap. It's probably gonna fall there somewhere, I don't know. Oh well, that's a pretty good effort. I'm gonna leave it there.